Hello B fans and welcome to a special video. This is one of the most requested videos that I had. It's all about exam practice and exam techniques. So people have been asking me, will I run through an actual exam paper with them and talk you through each question, for example, what you need to put into the answers and maybe some of the key concepts and techniques. And I thought, you know what a really good idea. So for your BTEC Level 2 Tech Award in Enterprise, for your Unit 3, the exam here, I'm going to take you through a past paper. We'll actually look at it, look at some of the techniques, and hopefully, you can enhance your learning and, well, make better use of the time you've got in the exam. First thing to say is it's a 2-hour exam, and it's 60 marks in total. You have got a case study to read. However, what I would advise is basically say that every mark you see, times it by 2. That's about roughly the time you can spend. So a state question for 1 mark, spend 2 minutes on it. You won't need 2 minutes, not at all. You'll get that time back straight away. The longer answer questions, wait, maybe 6 marks, spend 12 minutes on there. Remember, state questions are dead simple. You just state the answer. Explain means you make your point, you tell me why. And a calculation question, always show you're working. And of course, in any sort of conclusion, evaluate question, you need to show both sides of an argument and always form a conclusion. Pause the video while you get yourself sorted, get a pen, paper, get your calculator out, and get ready to have a go and go through a past paper with me. So let's take a look at the Enterprise paper from Thursday the 16th of May. Hopefully you've got a copy of this paper. If not, ask your teacher and they'll supply you with a copy of this paper. You may want to answer all the questions before you start and then review your answers, or you may want to do it a question at a time and then look at the answers. Firstly, remember you need to make sure you've got a black pen with you, a calculator and a ruler. Make sure you answer all the questions in black. You've got 60 marks in total and you have 2 hours. So basically work on the idea of how many marks you've got, times it by 2. Then do a small subtraction because you do need to read a case study before you start. Remember to read all the questions carefully and make sure that when you're answering your question, you're looking at what the command word says. So let's take a look at the case study. Make sure you take a few moments to read the case study. Look for the key business terms and look at the context that it's trying to give you, because that should hopefully get your mind thinking about the context and when you're answering your questions, what you need to include and what's going to be relevant to this business in question. You don't need to get too in-depth with the case study. You don't need to highlight anything at this point here. Just make sure that you start to think about the context of the questions and how they're going to be used in the exam. When you're happy with that, move on to the questions. This question is a fairly straightforward question where you've just got to do exactly what it says, mix and match, basically draw the arrows to the correct purpose from the financial document. And what you need to do here is to try and apply some of your knowledge that you've got about each document. As you can see, they've done the purchase order for you already. So they've said the purchase order is to identify the goods ordered from the supplier. And you're probably well aware that the purchase order is what you sent to the supplier to tell you what you're wanting to order. So you've got to try and work it backwards. Now the credit note is the next one. Now what I would personally advise you do in this sort of question is do the ones that you know first. So if you're not sure on the credit note, maybe look for the invoice, because you're probably well aware that an invoice is actually asking you to make a payment. So look down the list and work out which one is going to say where you want to make a payment. And you can see there to show money owed after goods are received. So there you go. You match your invoice one up there. Then you're probably well aware when you get to delivery note, if we're taking a guess on which one you're not so sure about. So delivery note, delivery note is going to be sent with the order when you make it. So you need to look down that list, and the only one you've got that says something about being sent with an order is to list the details about an order received. So you pair that one together, and then you're left with your credit note, which obviously is all about correcting errors in the customer's account. Remember that a credit note is basically when you want a refund or if something's wrong, so you're asking for some money to be sent back. The other one that may catch you out could be a statement of account. Remember that's sent at the end and it shows you basically your balance of your account, so what you owe or what you're owed by the company. That is probably the one that some people get caught out by. Everything else on that process is fairly straightforward. Just remember on those sort of questions, work with the ones you know and then try and work backwards. The next question is all about being given a statement of account. Now the first thing to remember here is that all the answers are included in the information that you've got. All you've got to do is take your time to read carefully and think about what's actually being asked. So let's look at B part 1. Identify how much Tyler owed his photography supplier at the end of April. Well, what you need to do is to look at what information you've got in front of you. And if you look at the statement of account, you'll see that it says it's from the 1st of April to the 30th of April. So that means that that's showing you all of his transactions for April. And at the bottom, it says total payment due. So that means how much he needs to pay. So the answer is right in front of you, £585. So the next part of that question says, identify how much Tyler owed his photography supplier at the end of March. And again, you need to look at the document. If you look carefully, it actually tells you what the opening account balance was on the 31st of March. So it tells you what he actually had in his balance at that point. And he owed basically £75. So you can see there, £75 is shown at the top, hidden away there. It actually is on the paper, you just got to look for it, and you can see it. And then, of course, it says, how much did Tyler pay his photography supplier during the month of April? And again, that's there to try and catch you out. Think about it, it's asking you how much he actually paid. So you need to follow the payments column down, and you can see that the payment he made to his supplier was £375. So as a result of that, he lowered his bill down to there, and then obviously he ordered a new tripod and it's gone back up again. But there's the answer to the question. £375 was the amount that he actually paid. On these sort of questions, you've got to think about what the question's asking and also look at the data and use it effectively. Don't rush. And make sure you think about what it's showing. Remember, the statement of account shows all the transactions going in and out of the business. And on that point there, look at the dates as well. That's why that question is possibly going to catch you out. Now, this next question is an explain question. So what you need to consider here is it's asking you to explain one benefit to Tyler of his supplier maintaining accurate records of account. Now, what you really need to be saying here is something about he then knows how much he owes, so there's your first mark, and when he will need to make the payment by. So you're sort of thinking your second mark there by explaining your answer. Remember, telling me why. Of course, there are other answers, but what you need to do with any answer you give there is make sure that you make your point and then you tell me why. Remember, it's only asking for a benefit, so don't give any form of drawbacks. Simple as that, you move on to the next question. Now we're moving on to activity 2. Now make sure you read these sorts of bits of information that you're given. There is a reason they're given, make sure you read them. Again, all the answers you're going to need for the questions, or all the data you're going to need to calculate the answers, are going to be included here. So you can see about the information about the staff portrait photos and the group photos, you can see about the discount, and you can see about the delivery charge. All information that you're going to need. Make sure you read it, and then we're going to move on to the next question. Okay, so what we need to do now is firstly, we need to complete that invoice. Now, we need to use some common sense here and some logic. The answers, again, are in front of you. So first column here you've got to do is work out the total price of the staff group photos. So all you've got to do, you can see in that column there, is you've got the quantity 5 photos. You know that each one costs £82.50. So you have to multiply the 5 by the £82.50. And that gives you £412.50. There is your first mark. Then you need to get the order total. So what you need to do, because you think about the obvious part there, total of the order, is add together the £516.25 with the £412.50, and you would get £928.75, and there is your second mark. Now this part potentially could catch you out. You get a new customer discount of 20%. That's 20% of the order total. So you need to find out the amount of discount that you will be given. So at this point here, you either multiply the 92875 by 0.2, which would be 20%, or you use a method you may use where you find 10% and times it by 2, but you would then get £185.75. What you then need to do is work out the subtotal. So that's going to be the amount that actually is paid. And to do that, you need to subtract or take away the discount figure you've got from the total. And that would leave the total bill to be paid of £743 and no pennies. So 00 put in there. If you follow it down, then a delivery charge is going to be charged, and then the total to pay is 75800. You could work the subtotal the other way, so you could have found the total amount to pay, take away the delivery charge, and that would have given you the same figure, because of course that would be the subtotal, and then potentially you could have worked it backwards by doing a percentage backwards to get that discount figure, but you would have needed to do the multiplication first to get through the way that I showed you. Personally, try and do it in a logical order like I showed you there. It's easier to understand when you think logically about this process. Imagine you making the purchase, and then it becomes more and more logical to follow. The next part of the question asks you to state 2 methods that Tyler could use to carry out direct marketing. So it's testing your understanding of direct marketing. And remember, direct marketing is marketing direct to the customer. So you could have had things like email, for example. That would have been an example of direct marketing, but I went for direct mail or junk mail, so things that go in the post to you that are addressed to the customer. And I went for magazines, so mail order magazines that are sent out and delivered. But any form of direct marketing that you studied is a valid answer. Just make sure you don't say the same thing twice. So obviously it would not be a good idea there to say direct mail and then junk mail as option number 2, because they are the same thing. Remember, the keyword is state, so all you have to do is write down the answer. This next question for activity 3 is one of my favourites. It's a nice simple calculation question, but before you do anything, make sure you show you're working and write down your formula. Now this question you can see here before now is asking you to calculate the total costs. So you need to remember that total costs are your fixed costs plus your variable costs. So the first thing that I do is I write down my formula. Now you've been given the fixed cost for the year, and you've been given a total variable cost for the year. The way this question could differ is if you were given a variable cost per unit and you were told how many units he sold. You remember, variable costs change with use, so you'd have to multiply the number of units he sold by the cost per unit to get the total variable cost. So remember, it's total fixed costs and total variable costs. However, in this question, nice and simple, just you've got to take your fixed costs and add them to your variable costs. And as you can see there, that's 1420 plus 1500, and that gives me a total cost for the enterprise of £2,920. By showing my working and getting it correct, I've got myself 2 marks. The next part of the question asks you to explain. Now look at the question. It says 2 benefits for Tyler's enterprise of calculating the break-even point. So firstly, you need to get into your mind, what do we mean by break-even? Well, break-even is a point where we make no profit or loss, remember? And then it wants you to give 2 benefits of why he might want to calculate that. So you need to think, what are the advantages in knowing your break-even? Remember, it's an explain question, so make your point and tell me why. So in my answer here, I've gone for Tyler will know how many items he needs to sell. There's my first point. And then I've got for my second one saying that he can set himself targets, that he can calculate his margin of safety. So remember, the margin of safety is the difference between your break-even point and the actual number you're selling. To give you an example there, if my break-even point was 50 and I was selling 100 items, then my margin of safety would be 50 because I'm 50 items above my break-even point. That's where I'm making my profit. Remember, you want the bigger margin of safety because it protects your business in case something was to go wrong. The second point I'm going to make here is that Tyler could work out if the business is making a profit. There's my next mark. And then I'm going to explain it. And if not, he could take steps to improve it. Now, of course, what could he do? Well, he could maybe look to try and maybe lower his price to increase his sales. He could maybe increase his price so he doesn't need to sell as many items. Or he could try and find a cheaper supplier. They're all options that he could do. But I didn't need to say that because I picked up my mark already by making my point and explaining it. Activity 4 is another one of my favourites. It's the break-even calculation. Now, firstly, remember, break-even shows you the number of items you need to sell. So the break-even point is how many items you need to sell. And of course, you need to know your fixed costs, your variable costs per unit, and your average selling price per unit. You can see here they've given you the formula, and you need for 2 marks to calculate the break-even point. In this question here, it's quite simple. You need to take your fixed costs, and you need to divide them by your selling price minus your variable cost. Remember, the bottom part is in brackets and needs to be done first. So that's £850 for each selling price of the wedding, subtracted from the cost of the wedding, which was 220, which gives you £630. And then you've got your fixed cost of 2520. Divide that by 630 and you get the answer of 4. So he needs to do 4 weddings to break even. Show you're working, and that's a nice, easy 2 marks. This next part of the question uses a break-even chart. Now, you could be asked to draw one of these, so make sure that you could actually plot the points and use a table. Or you may be asked to identify the lines. Remember, the straight line is always going to be the fixed cost. Also remember, the cost that actually goes from this straight line, so where the 4,000 here, that diagonal line that moves upwards, is always going to be your total cost, because your total cost always starts at your fixed cost line. But you can see here, this question isn't asking that. This question here is saying, identify what area label X represents. Well, you know that where the 2 lines cross, so where your revenue and your total cost line cross, as you can see there, you know that 8 point there is a break-even point. Everything before that in section X is a loss, or an area of loss, and everything in that section Y, which is after your break-even point, is a profit, or an area of profit. And of course, you are asked that favourite question in Z, what line is a straight line? The fixed cost. It really is as simple as that. If you were asked to interpret off that graph what the break-even point is, remember you'd follow it down, and you can see that's 8 weddings, or £5,000 in revenue. Just literally follow it down from where the break-even point is. They are the sort of questions you may get asked when you're looking at break-even. So these next series of questions are questions which require you to explain. Now remember, explain, as we keep saying, is make your point and tell me why. Now you'll see for this question C, there's 3 marks. But you've got to explain one benefit to Tyler's enterprise of using face-to-face selling for his wedding photographs and videos. So again, remember what sort of product he's selling. Think about who he's selling to and what his customer expects. Firstly, state the obvious. So it could enable Tyler to increase his sales. Now, that's a point. And I've got to say why. Because he can personally relate to his customers. So you're thinking about the product he sells, and it's an expensive item. It's a very special day. So it probably makes more sense that he wants to actually relate to them and talk to them. And then there's a mark there. And to get the 3rd mark, I'm going to explain again by saying, and it shows his products that he built. He's able to show them his products. That builds trust. So you can see there that I've explained that he's also able to show them what he does, and he's able to build the trust. And there you go. I picked up my 3 marks. The next part of the question is a payment method question. And I quite like these questions because as long as you do a bit of revision on your payment methods, you will be perfectly fine. So here you've got to explain 2 benefits of Tyler offering his customers direct debits as a method of payment. So firstly, think about what a direct debit is. Remember, it's something that goes into your bank and it goes in on a set date. However, it can vary. Remember that you can change the amount you pay. So you've got to think about what benefits will Tyler get. In this case here, I've chosen that payment will automatically go into the bank. There's 1 mark. And then I've said it makes it quicker and more secure. So I thought about security compared to cash, and I thought about the speed. And there's my mark there for the explanation. Also, I've done my 2nd point here. It will save him time. So there's my next mark. And he will not have to spend time chasing people to make payment. There's my 2nd mark. Notice that I've used common sense there. So to the first point, I've referred it back to being basically quicker because it goes into his bank account compared to cash. And I've thought about it being more secure than compared to cash. And the next part there, I've thought about how he doesn't have to chase people to make payments. And obviously, it saves him time because he isn't doing that ultimately. You remember, you could have other answers such as he'll have no charge to pay in the cash to the bank. That's a valid answer, you know. Or it could be that it'll encourage people to spend more because they may not have that large amount of money to pay up front. Or they could pay an instalment. So he can set up a direct debit where they pay £30 each month. They'd all be valid answers. You've got to try and sometimes think about, in them questions there, when it asks you for the benefit, think and use common sense again. What would be the benefit for that organisation or that payment method? However, make sure you do think about that payment method. Don't just try and chuck some random advantage in. Again, try and link it to that context and that case study. Now, activity 5 is one of those activities that I absolutely love because it's cash flow. Now, question 5A is a simple state question, and it's the favourite question, cash flow forecast. State what is meant. The key word here is a prediction, and then you need to say of inflows and outflows of money in a business. Remember, cash flow shows all the money going into and out of a business. It shows the liquidity position of a business, whether it's able to meet its obligations and pay its debts. Remember, the difference here is if it said cash flow statement, then that would be the actual inflows and outflows of money in a business. As simple as that. Section B is complete a cash flow forecast. Now you can see the blanks you've got here. Now you've got to find part 1 there, which says total inflows. The way you do that is dead simple. You know that he's got wedding photographs of £2,910. You've got a blank, and you know his total inflows are £4,050, and you need to add those two together normally. So you have to add your wedding photos and your other photos together to get the answer. So the way that you're going to find your answer is you're going to subtract the 2910 from the 4050. You find your missing number, which would be 1140. So you're just working backwards. Rather than adding, you're just doing a subtraction. Now, the total outflows is really simple. You know, to work out total outflows, you just need to add your outflows together. You've got £1,000 in his salary. Remember, a salary is a fixed cost, unlike a wage, which does change. And you've got other costs. If you add them together, you get £2,280, and it's as simple as that. Now, the next part of this is the tricky part, potentially. You've got to work out your net cash flow. There's an assumption you understand what is meant by the term net cash flow. Remember that net cash flow is what you make or you lose in each month. Now, well, you work it out, it's really simple. You do your total inflows minus your total outflows. And you can see in August, you've got inflows of 4630 and you've got outflows of 2940. And you just subtract those two numbers, and you're given the number of 1690. Now, remember, and you can see there they haven't put negatives in brackets, but that's something that can happen sometimes. And always remember that your opening balance is your previous month's closing balance. So you can see there, if you finish, let's take July, for example, on £110 in the bank, then you're going to open in August with £110 in. Also in this question here, look at the liquidity problem. You can see that in June, the closing balance is minus 1660. That technically means that they are overdrawn. There is a short-term loan being required. And there's a reason why that happens, which we'll look at in more detail next. However, make sure you spot those sort of things. That is an example of a liquidity problem, where the closing balance is a negative. That means they're needing to borrow money from the bank, or somebody will have to put some money in. And remember, a short-term loan is called an overdraft. Now, this next part of the question is trying to get you to understand that you could identify that negative cash flow that was happening in June. Now, what you need to do here is give a solution and then explain why it is a solution. So firstly, you've got to see the problem and then think, right, it was all to do with that. You can see where you got that problem in his cash flow. You can see what was causing it. And then at that point there, what solutions can you provide? So you should have spotted that that purchase of the new equipment is causing a severe cash flow problem. So what could he do about the equipment? Well, why buy the equipment when he could lease it? So instead of spending all the money up front, he could lease it. And then what would happen is he wouldn't have to pay the same amount of money out in one go. So you can see I've given an answer there. He will not need to have £3,200 going out of the business in June. It'd be a lesser amount of money. Drawback of leasing, of course, the item doesn't belong to him and it would cost him more in the long term. But you don't need to put that in this answer. Also, you can see here that another answer you could give is he could increase his selling price so he could bring in more revenue. Now that, of course, is going to bring in more money. And then, of course, he could afford to actually pay it. You could even use answers such as hire purchase. So, again, he would lease it effectively and then pay one larger sum at the end. Or maybe he could arrange credit until he could afford it. They're all valid answers. Remember, though, that you only need to give basically why that solution would improve his cash flow and no drawbacks at that point. So this next set of questions in Activity 6 is starting to look at the financial documents when it comes to your statement of financial position. As you can see in question 6a, the first question is a state question. So very simply, you just need to say what is meant by the term creditor. So you need to be aware that a creditor is somebody who owes a business money. And you may give an example like a supplier. Remember, creditors are people who you owe money to, and debtors are people who owe money to you, debt to you. So just remember that you will give your customers maybe credit and they become a debtor because they then owe you money until they pay it. If your supplier gives you credit, giving you time to pay, then that makes them a creditor because they've given you credit, but you need to pay them. So a creditor is somebody you owe money to. A debtor is somebody who owes money to you. The next part of the question asks you to state the meaning of the term capital. Now, capital is a fancy word for money, but in this terminology, we need to know that capital is the money that's invested in the business. So all the money that's invested in the business, as simple as that, that's what's meant by the term capital. Now, in part B, you've got a statement of financial position. Now, remember, the statement of financial position shows what the business is worth at any one particular time. It shows your assets and your liabilities. You have your fixed assets on this. Remember, fixed assets are assets that will take longer than a year to turn into cash. And in this case, we have a car and we have photographic equipment. And you have to calculate your total fixed assets. Quite simply, all you need to do is add your car and your photographic equipment together and you get your first mark for total fixed assets. Then we have our current assets. Now remember, current assets are assets or items that we own that we can turn into cash within a year. Our best current asset is cash, but we don't have any of that in this example here. But then we have inventory, which is another word for stock. And we have debtors, remember, people who owe us money. You need to work out the missing figure for debtors, which would be 939. And the way you calculate that is you take your total current assets, which you've been given of 156. You subtract the inventory, which is 626, and you find the missing number. Remember, really simple to calculate total current assets. You just add them together. Now we get the bit where you need to work out your net current assets. Now your net current assets is calculated by doing your current assets take away your current liabilities. Now what that means is, remember, liabilities and current liabilities are debts that you need to pay within a year. A liability is somebody you owe money to, so it's something you're responsible for. Current means within a year. So when it says net current assets, it basically means how much money have you currently got available, so you have to take away your current assets from your current liabilities. Once you've completed that, you're then able to work out your net assets. Your net assets is the total value of the company at this point today. To do that, you have to take your fixed assets and you have to add them to your net current assets that you've calculated, and you'll get the figure of 6728. And all your net asset shows is what the company is worth today. If you're finding that a little bit complex, try and think about using the column approach. So normally in the accounts, columns tend to lead into the next part. So if you look at how that's set out there, net current assets, so total current assets is below total current liabilities and obviously total current assets. If you subtract those two away, you find your net current assets. And to find your total assets, all you have to do is add your fixed assets to your current net assets. It really is as straightforward as that. Don't worry if you find that complex. It certainly is a difficult area. And I have actually got a video that you can go and find on my channel which explains the statement of financial position, or the balance sheet as it's sometimes called, which you might want to go and check out to help you now. In part C, this question is all about ratio analysis. As you can see, you've been given your current ratio and you've been given your liquid capital ratio. Now remember that your current ratio and your liquid capital ratio are liquidity ratios. So they show how much money is in the business and they show how able the business is to meet its current obligations or to pay its current debts. Remember, current assets is the amount of money that you've got available at the moment in your business, so things you can turn to cash within a year, and current liabilities are debts you have to pay within a year. Inventory is another term for stock. All you have to do here is use the information that you had in the previous question with the ratios to be able to successfully complete this part of the question. So your first part says work out the current ratio. So you need to find your current assets. So if you look on your list of information that you've got from your statement of financial position, you can see the total current assets are 1565. You need to divide this by the current liabilities, which you can see from there is 1252. You then, when you get that division, will get the answer of 1.25. Now you could leave the answer as 1.25 and you would get the mark for this question, or you should really express it as a ratio. So that is 1.25 to 1. What that means is for every £1 of debt that he's currently got to pay, he's got £1.25 in current assets. So if he was to shut the business down, he could pay off all his debts, and for every £1 he owes, he'll have 25p left over for himself. So that's quite a good position to be in. Calculate the current liquidity, liquid capital ratio for Tyler. Now in this part of the ratio, you've got to do the top half first. So you need to think about bid mass stroke bob mass. So current assets minus inventory. So you're back over to your statement of financial position and you're picking off the 1565 and you're subtracting the 626. That will give you 939. You then divide that by 1252 and that'll give you an answer of 0.7. Again, you could just write the answer down 0.7, or you'd express it as 0.75 to 1. Sorry, 0.75 to 1, or 0.75, you could write the answer down. So you would then write it down, and that means that if he was to shut the business down tomorrow, basically, if you take away his inventory, he's got 75 pence of assets to every £1 of liability he's got. The reason the liquid capital ratio is seen as better than the current ratio is because if you've got lots of stock, you've still got to sell it. If you want to sell stock quickly, you may have to reduce the price, which means that actually you won't necessarily get the full value for your inventory that you think you're going to get. That's where that logic comes from. Remember to show you're working and make sure you write down the correct answer, and don't make like I did there, where even though I've got 0.75 down, I then go 0.7 because I'm thinking of a different number. Just check your working, check your answers. Now part D asks you to explain, so back on the question, explain one action Tyler could take to improve the liquidity of his enterprise. So you need to think about what can he do, what goes into those formulas now that could improve his liquidity position. So you've either got to do something with your liabilities, your current liabilities, or you've got to do something with your current assets. So one way that he could get more money in is he could ask those debtors to pay him quicker. That would be a valid answer, because then he'd get it turned into cash and he could use that cash straight away, and also he knows they're going to pay him. You could suggest that he holds less stock, so he holds a sale to get rid of some of his inventory. Or of course you could ask him to maybe buy less stock from his suppliers, so he hasn't got to pay as much money out in his current liabilities. Of course, you've not been given the information about current liabilities, but you can make that assumption. So you need to think back to the formula there and think, right, what impacts that formula? What can I use? That's what that question really means, though. Liquidity is basically the money in his business. How can he get more money in his business? And you've got to think about what can he do. So obviously have less stock. He could obviously ask people who owe him money, his debtors, to pay him quickly. Or he could try and buy less stock himself. Maybe have an agreement with his supplier where he only buys the stock when he actually needs it and they deliver it quickly. Of course, that might not be feasible because maybe he needs the stock and they have to send it to him and make it before it can arrive. They're all considerations, but that question isn't asking for that. I'm just showing you more knowledge that maybe you could include. Now, activity 7 goes back to probably marketing, which you covered at the start of your course. Now, it's basically giving you a bit of context, and you need to think about the context. It's telling you that Tyler's enterprise is a sole trader business and he's got very little experience in marketing. He's only got £600 to spend on promotion, and he thinks that these two factors will have an impact on the choice that he can choose. Now, notice it says the choice of promotional method. So it's asking you to think about different methods of promotion. Now, it's trying to say, explain one impact of each factor of the choice of promotional method Tyler may use. So in other words, they've given you the size of budget as being one of these factors, and they're saying basically explain the impact of that. So what may be the impact of his budget available? Well, he may actually choose the cheaper promotional method, but that might not be the best method or the most effective method at reaching his target audience. So it's basically getting you to think about the fact that if he does choose the cheapest one, it may not be the best one. So you've got to think about the logic there. Or you could argue maybe another valid answer could be something like, he may be able to do a good method once, but he can't do it consistently, so people will forget that his business exists. Think about advertising, you probably want a consistent message. It's all about making the point and explaining it. Then you've got the question, the size of the enterprise, so the fact that he's a small sole trader business. So you could then say things like, he may not have experience in marketing, so he may not choose the most appropriate marketing. Or you could even make that point by saying that he may not have the experience because he can't afford to employ somebody who is a specialist in marketing. Or he may not have the brand reputation and loyalty that already exists with a larger name organisation. Or he may not have the connections with celebrities which larger organisations have, so they could use celebrity endorsement to promote their business. They're all valid answers. You just got to think about what would be an appropriate answer to think about that factor, size of enterprise. Now the final question is an evaluative question. It's worth 6 marks. Now you can see with the evaluation question, you're going to need to show pros and cons or advantages and disadvantages, and at the end you need to form a conclusion. If you look at the question, it even tells you that in the bullet points. But look at what you're being given first. It tells you that Tyler has a choice of 2 promotional methods. He can either have a stall at a wedding exhibition, or he can publish an article in a local wedding magazine. Again, it reiterates he's a sole trader and he's got their limited promotional budget and he's not sure which method. So he wants you to evaluate the 2 methods above, and you are basically saying when you're doing that, which one is the most effective, give the advantages and drawbacks of each one for his business. Now what you're looking for there to pick up the marks is each method showing a pro and a con, and a pro and a con. Ideally you can get away with doing 1, but I'd like to see 2, and then you do the same for the next method, a pro and a con, and a pro and a con, and then you'd form a conclusion. So I'm going to just read you the answer that's here, which actually would pick up all the marks. So Tyler could attend the wedding exhibitions, as this would enable him to raise awareness of his business. There's a knowledge point there. And then to customers who are his target audience. Notice they've used good quality business terminology by using the term target audience. This would also allow him to meet customers face to face. So you've got a good link there about how it's more personal, and explain the services he offers and build that personal relationship with the customer. That's a really good answer because they've explained their knowledge. Notice now they do the drawbacks. However, this could be quite expensive to attend, and he could not be sure that people will attend. So it's trying to pick out the fact that it could be expensive and he's not sure people are going to attend. He also will have his competition close by, which means that he could attract, so they could attract his customers. So he's pointed out his competition could be at the wedding fair as well. The advantages of the magazine, so now he goes into his next point now, are that it's local, so it goes to his potential target customers, and he gets control of the message that's included. So notice again, it's a lot of key terminology that's going in there. Also, the magazine will be around for a while, so potential customers may keep it and then use it when they need it. So again, it's pointing out an advantage. The magazine may be left around. People may leave it at home and use it when they want it. Now he goes into his drawbacks. The drawbacks in this option, though, could be that he may not have many readers who are actually looking to get married, stroke the target audience, and he has little control where the magazine actually goes. So it's trying to point out that he has no way of knowing whether people getting married are going to read the magazine. You may assume that because it's a wedding magazine, but it could go anywhere, you don't know. Now he goes into his conclusion. So he gets, in conclusion, I would recommend. Now that's a really good way of getting your conclusion point in there. That he chooses the exhibition as this is the best place to find customers with an interest in his product and his target market, whilst also allowing him the chance to personally sell his product to customers, which is really important for the type of service he sells. At that point there, I personally would have stopped. However, this candidate goes on and writes he could always hand out leaflets at the exhibition to potential customers, which is likely to be more successful as this is his target audience. As you can see there, they've made the points for each question,
they've concluded, and really importantly in their conclusion, they've not presented any new information, that would pick up all the 6 marks. What you need to make sure you do in conclusion is make your points, show a pro and a con, use those words like however, on the other hand, a potential drawback could be, and make sure you also get a conclusion in. That is how you complete the paper, and hopefully this has been a useful experience for you.
Thank you for joining me for that little walkthrough of an exam paper. Hopefully you've now got a better understanding of what's required from the exam paper, and hopefully you found that useful. You know what I'm going to say now, don't you? If you need more resources, go to my YouTube channel, go to the playlist, for example. I've got a playlist for the Tech Award. Have a look at my videos, go through any knowledge you need to practice. If you have any questions, you can obviously contact me on the socials. You know, they're on the bottom of the screen down there. And remember, until next time, make sure you keep buzzing.